Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Sports Night on the Southern Middle Tennessee Sports Network. I'm Chris Yao, along with Maurice Patton. As always, today on the podcast, we are joined by TSSAA Executive Director Bernard Childress. Mr. Childress, thanks for joining us.
Chris, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.
First day of the dead period, Bernard. Heard of any violations yet?
Oh, no. Haven't heard of any violations, Maurice, but definitely have talked to some principals as well as superintendents this morning, making sure that they were doing the right things.
Hey, sometimes it's better to get forgiveness than permission, I guess, right?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's much of forgiveness with all the things that are going on now with the pandemic. And, you know, we're having people ask for exceptions to have graduation, for example, during the dead period and things like that, which definitely is something that we would, approve. But they were just making sure that athletes could attend events, where coaches would be present like that. So, all those things are being ironed out today.
And I guess that makes sense, kind of a better safe than sorry phone call right there.
Much better. We would much rather deal with it on the front end than on the back end. You're exactly right.
Yeah. Hey, I'm sure you're aware last week down here at Columbia Central, we had to suspend the last week of football practice leading up to the dead period because of a positive COVID-19 test. Speaking of the pandemic, are you aware of any other interruptions based on the pandemic that took place leading up to the dead period?
Well, not necessarily interruptions like the situation that occurred at Columbia Central. Of course, I got the call that morning about the Columbia Central situation, but we have had some other student athletes that have tested positive. That one, for example, and I won't even mention the area, had tested positive, but he had not even been to practice. But he was definitely a member of one of the high school football teams, but he had been at home quarantining for about a week and did not go to practice. So we definitely have heard of other cases, but no case has reached the level that it did at Columbia Central, where everything had to be shut down.
With that being the case, how concerned are you as we come back from dead period with regards to that type of thing?
Well, I mean, I think we're very concerned, and not just it's not just about athletics. We're concerned when it comes to the athletic arena. As always, our number one goal is to keep our student athletes safe. But we're working, with doctors that specialize in infectious diseases, and they're guiding us. And what I've said many times is it's not us making the schedule right now. It's the pandemic that's making the schedule. It's determining what we do and how we do it. And we're not going to waver from that. We're going to get the advice from the individuals that know what they're talking about. And those are the medical doctors and the experts that specialize in infectious diseases. And I think the thing that we feel comfortable with is that we not only have people at the local and state level, but we have that national audience right now, and we're on meetings. I can tell you, doing a Zoom meeting with you all right now, but right after this meeting, we're going to be meeting with
I think we've lost audio there.
Yeah. Hey, Bernard, can you still hear us? Because we lost you there.
Did I lose y'all?
Yeah. Now you're back. Thank goodness. You were saying that you come out of this Zoom meeting and you're heading into another one?
Yeah, we're heading to another one with Dr. Diamond at Vanderbilt, and who's on our National Sports Medicine Advisory Committee with the NFHS, along with Mark Reeves in our office. and we're going to talk, and we feel very comfortable that we're getting advice from, and not just at the local and state level, but at the national level as to how we need to proceed. And each time I've done something like this, I've given a shout out to the governor's economic recovery task force, who they've been very, very nice to include us in any decisions that they make as to what phase, each county is in and how we proceed athletically. So we're working with several people that makes us comfortable that we're making the right decision for young people.
Visiting with TSSAA Executive Director Bernard Childress. Obviously, there are different areas of the state where it may be more prominent, coronavirus may be more prominent in other areas. Is there a provision where some schools may be able to participate in athletics, or is it all or nothing?
No, it can't be all or nothing in this situation, Chris, because, we got that and continue to get that, especially from coaches. Well, this, even from county to county, is different. So-and-so school is being able to practice and we're not being able to do anything in our county. Well, we simply tell them, you got to go by what your local health department, work closely with the people in your area because they know exactly where you are. And you've got to make sure that you're doing exactly what those individuals, and you're working closely with the health department and, of course, following the governor's guidelines and the guidelines that the schools set themselves as far as when they can practice, when they can participate. And every county is going to be different. When we get, and I know you all have heard it, well, it has to be all or nothing. Either you're practicing or you're not practicing all across the state. Our response to that is, how is that fair to a county? For example, I think all the way up until a couple of weeks ago, I use Hancock County for an example. They had no cases until a couple of weeks ago, and they may have had one. How is it fair to the kids in Hancock County who just are hearing about the pandemic to not be able to practice if their superintendent and their local health department feels like it's safe for them to be able to, participate in activities? How is that fair to shut them down when, they're not having any issues, at the current time?
Right around here in Middle Tennessee, Bernard, it looks like particularly Metro Nashville and maybe Clarksville, Montgomery County are going to have a tough time getting started up. I know Chris asked, would there be provisions, but how, when you've got, particularly for football, because obviously we're so football driven, certainly don't want to leave out volleyball and girls soccer and everything else that's coming this fall. But right, the most eyes are on football. As you look at region play, and you've got teams from various counties, some that may have started up, some that may not have, how do you guys see yourselves approaching that, or have you gotten that far along yet?
Well, and that's such a great question, because in a national meeting just Thursday of last week, I think that was discussed. Probably we were supposed to have been on the call for an hour and a half. It probably stretched a couple of hours because people were trying to, all across the nation, were saying basically the same thing when it comes to that regional play in football. What are you going to do if you get a situation where two teams compete on a Friday night and then you find out that a couple of kids tested positive and now you got to shut everything down and all of those teams have to quarantine? Everyone on the team has to quarantine. We don't even know what those guidelines are going to say going forward, because at one time, if you can remember, it says the individuals that test positive had to quarantine. Now they're coming back and saying anyone that has been in contact with that individual for 10 minutes needs to be quarantined for 14 days. We haven't gotten to that point. We don't even know what that's going to look like. Everybody's, discussing it, but I think it's going to really depend on the guidelines that are set forth, by the CDC and by, the individuals that know a whole lot more about what needs to happen than what we know as far as the medical professionals. And we just got to rely on them to make the right decision. But have we gotten to that point? We've gotten to that point to discuss it. Do we know what we're going to do? I can't give you an answer today.
That's understandable completely. I'm not sure if Maurice has any other coronavirus questions necessarily, but I am personally interested, as someone who's not from the Middle Tennessee area or and is very limited knowledge of the TSSAA. Can you tell other people who may be in my shoes kind of how you got to from Murray County area to being executive director of TSSAA?
Well, Chris, instead of just dealing on how I ended up at TSSAA, I was a high school coach and principal before I went to the TSSAA office as an assistant executive director. And I was assistant executive director for 14 years before I took over as a director for the last 12 years. But I think there's a lot of people that don't really understand how TSSAA works. We're an organization, a nonprofit organization of schools. And I think people think that, that I always said that office on Lebanon Road, we only have 18 people in that service in some 800 and some middle schools and high schools. But they write their own rules and regulations. They just ask us to enforce what they want. I mean, we make recommendations to them, at times when we see things that, could possibly change in the bylaws. But all of our rules and regulations are written by the member schools themselves. They just ask us to enforce what they want.
Obviously the coronavirus has been the biggest thing on your plate since mid-March, I would imagine. I'm not even sure if there's been anything else on your plate, but going back to the fall, there was a pretty high profile eligibility situation regarding a school that has some opponents in our coverage area. How much eligibility stuff have you dealt with here over the past 2-3 months?
Oh, I think we deal with eligibility questions, if not, every single day. There's always, because now with all of us having, everyone having access to our email addresses and everything, we're constantly asking, answering questions from parents, if not from administrators, about the possibility of kid transferring here or there, eligibility questions. And what we try to say to our schools is ask us on the front end. If you have any situation whatsoever that's questionable, pick up the phone and call us, email us. Let's talk about and get the interpretation of whether the kid's going to be eligible or ineligible. We want to deal with all of these situations on the front end and not get into a situation on the back end like you talked about the situation in the fall of last year, where you find out the kid is ineligible, and then all of a sudden schools have to end up forfeiting the contest, because that's not even fair to the other kids on whichever team that is. And trust me, we don't go to work every day to deal with situations like that. Our job is, and I say this to our staff all the time, our job is to make kids eligible to participate. We're about participation, and we want those participation numbers up. But we got to do that within the confines of the rules. And if there's any rule that we can use to make a kid eligible, that's what we do. We don't go to work every day to try to get kids ineligible to participate.
Speaking of that, Legislative Council back this spring, I think it was, dealt with a rule that has drawn a lot of attention over the past years. You guys got rid of the All-Star rule.
Yeah, and it was time. I mean, when you look at the All-Star participation rule and the way it was written and making kids ineligible if they participate in the All-Stars, we have so many All-Star events that were occurring. But the inconsistency is what was causing us a problem, and especially, and you've been in it long enough, Maurice, to know how we dealt with baseball. And that was the one that was in summer baseball, kids were, and just didn't think it was consistent when you said one kid, if it was invited to an all-star game, if their school hadn't started in the summer, that they could participate. But if your school had started in the fall, then you got invited to the same all-star game, you could not participate. I mean, that to us just didn't make sense. And, I think it boiled down to, this is educational athletics. We're about school sports. Why do we really care if parents really want their kids to participate in an event and the coaches are fine with it? Why should we be dictating to them that they can't participate in an event like that? So I think it was a good change. The council, and that was one that we as a staff proposed, but the schools voted on it in the regional meetings in November, overwhelmingly voted to do away with it. And I think it's going to be a good change for the association.
Absolutely. Once again, talking with TSSAA Director Bernard Childress, it seems like we all are exactly like you just said. You are in the business of helping participation and keeping it at a high level. Have you been happy with the way that high school athletics has allowed more kids to participate in, 2 or 3 more sports, instead of just the focusing on one? It seems like lately everybody's kind of opened up and said, hey, multi-sport athletes are really positive. What's been your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We encourage multi-sport participation, and, specialization, was pretty much almost taking over high school sports for a while, but I think it's kind of shifting in a different direction because there's so many parents, for example, that feel like their kid is going, in order for them to receive athletic scholarships, so to speak, in a certain sport, that they have to specialize in that sport. And it's just the opposite to that. When you talk to college coaches, for example, and they are looking for athletes who are well-rounded and who participate in different sports, because every sport teaches you something different. We're not about, preparing kids to play college sports anyway, because 98% of our student athletes are not going to go on and play at the next level. That 2% that's going to do that, they have the talent and the gift to go ahead and work hard and participate at that level. But we want to enhance the students' education by providing activities that would, basically get them to love school. And I use this analogy all the time. I said, believe it or not, every kid doesn't go to school to learn. They learn because they're in school. Sure. Our job is to provide activities to get them there. And the more activities they can get involved with, especially athletics, we already know, because there's been studies done. And one study that I always talk about is the one from the University of Michigan years ago, where they said students who participate in athletics, those are the ones that, have low attendance rates, all the things that we try to do, and we want kids to, as far as numbers are concerned. Those kids are the ones that go to school regularly. They score high on the SAT, ACT, and standardized tests. Those are the ones that graduate, go on to college, graduate, and come back, and they're successful in their communities and they contribute to society. That's what this is all about for us, is that we're trying to make kids well-rounded enough to know that you go on and your ultimate goal is to be successful in life.
Absolutely. That's what you see, obviously with, like you said, eligibility rules, that you have to do well in school in order to participate in athletics. So it's very important. And that's a motivating factor for a lot of kids. I know I've seen it, we all have.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
And I was just on a conversation with superintendents just last week, and you know, they wanted an update as to where we were, you know, in fall sports. But my question to them was, let's put sports to the side. Let's start with the foundation of why we exist, and that is to enhance the education of young people, to help you all enhance their education. What we're going to do about starting school? That's the question we have is school's going to, you know, our school's going to start on time? You're going to be on an abbreviated schedule. Can you tell us anything about what that classroom setting looks like? And so it's just so many things to this pandemic that we're having to, you know, try to filter through to get some answers.
Sure.
We're visiting with TSSAA Executive Director Bernard Childress, a Columbia native, Columbia Central Hall of Famer. And Bernard, before we let you go, we've kind of come full circle here. You mentioned in answer to what will high school athletics look like this fall, your question is, what will high school look like this fall? Is it almost paramount that kids actually physically be in the school building in order for athletics to take place? Or do you see a remote learning situation that would still allow athletics, or how would you see that?
Oh, again, another great question, Maurice. I think we'll see a combination of both because, again, I think the options are being given to students, you know, as we speak, is that, you know, you can come to school and, you know, and attend face-to-face, or if you do not feel comfortable with that, then there may be some schools and school systems, and especially many of our independent schools that are going to provide classwork virtually. It will not affect students' eligibility if they are, you know, for some reason uncomfortable and they are in a school, enrolled in regular attendance in that school, and actually are taking classes virtually for a while. That student is still, we're going to have to work through that with schools, and we have talked to them about it, but those students are still going to be eligible to participate. So do they absolutely have to be in school on a day-to-day basis? The answer to that is no, but school has to be in session, and they have to be enrolled in that school and taking classes from that school in order to participate.
That sounds great. Thanks again so much for joining us. It has been a pleasure to have you. Want to make special mention of all of our sponsors, Custom Stone Handlers, Columbia Academy. We appreciate them. And we are going to continue to bring you local sports in southern Middle Tennessee in area, especially obviously, you know, concentrating on Murray County and that local area. So thank you guys so much for joining us, and we look forward to talking with you and keeping you updated throughout the week on sm-tnsports.com. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and all social media. We appreciate it. Once again, for Maurice Patton, thank you once again to Bernard Childress, Director of TSSAA, and thank you once again to you guys. I'm Chris Yao. You guys have a great day.